And I want you to think of the scene of Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Again, if you were watching the oppression of Bilal, you're watching a man being whipped and starved and dehydrated and placed in the middle of the desert in this humiliating way with a big stone placed on him, one that takes multiple men, and he's screaming in pain. And there's an arrogant man standing over him. And Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu is under the stone. But Bilal radiallahu anhu is insisting on ahadun ahad, one God, one God. Who's the more honored of these people? And this is really powerful, because if you think about that moment, it is Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu who is in the most humiliating situation, in the most difficult situation. But despite all of the harm that's being inflicted on his physical person, he is being elevated in stature. We look to Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu and we say, what a man. We say, what a believer. We say, what an example of courage. What an example of bravery. What an example of sincerity. What an example of resilience. And that's what made Islam so threatening. That's what made faith so threatening to the polytheists of Mecca. That this man would be willing to be subjected to all of this. And he says, ahadun ahad, one for his faith. Now here's what I want us to talk about. You know, when you think about oppressors, when you think about narcissists, oppressors are almost always narcissists. And there is a sense of, how dare you find your strength in anything but me? How dare you find your validation? How dare you find your meaning and your purpose in anything but me? Because the oppressor crushes people and crushes the self-esteem, right? Lowers and belittles the intelligence of a people, belittles the worth of a people, and puts them down to a point that they think that the only way that they can succeed is through validation through them. And so there is nothing more threatening to an oppressor than a person who cannot be broken or a person who cannot be bought. There is nothing more, frightening to that person or to that system than a person who is liberated even if they are chained, than a person who is free even if they are enslaved. Subhanallah, that finds that much. And that's why when Rabi'i ibn Amir stands in front of Rustum in Persia and has absolutely no fear of the person that's sitting in front of him, right, on a throne and looking down at him, and says, Allah has sent us لِنُخْرِجَ الْعِبَادِ مِنْ عِبَادَةِ الْعِبَادِ إِلَى عِبَادَةِ رَبِّ الْعِبَادِ. That God has sent us to take people out from being enslaved to other slaves to being enslaved only to the Lord of all slaves. وَمِنْ ضِيقِ الدُّنْيَا إِلَى سَعَةِ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ. And from the constriction of this world to the expanse of this world, this life and the next. وَمِنْ جَوْرِ الْأَدْيَانِ إِلَى عَدْلِ الْإِسْلَامِ. And from the constriction, from the oppression of other systems to the justice of Islam. That's so threatening. The fact that this man had this much izzah, this much honor, that was not an honor that was demonstrated through the clothes of Rib'i. It wasn't through him being vulgar or vile in his speech. Rather, it was the dignity of this man. And so, if you're thinking about Mecca, why would these oppressors increase in their oppression as they saw the Prophet ﷺ and his followers increasing only in their good character? Why was it that they went from insults to physical injury to murder to banishment of entire tribes? Was it because the Muslims were responding with aggression? Was it because the Muslims were falling into their trap? Or was it because the Muslims were so self-sufficed that these believers had so much self-actualization that they took their power from a power source that these people did not control, and they derived their dignity from a source of power that was inaccessible to these people? That's what's so threatening, and that's the power of faith. That's the power of faith, that it honors a man like Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu despite all of the worldly shackles, and it humiliates a man like Abu Lahab despite all of the worldly embellishments. Because when a person cannot be bought and when a person cannot be broken, then they are a threat to systems that depend, and narcissists and oppressors that depend on breaking people down, We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us izzah through our faith, to give us a sense of strength and dignity, to never allow us to be afraid of those that taunt the believers, to never allow us to relinquish what Allah has given us of this beautiful faith, to keep us firm and steadfast and sincere, to never allow us to be broken